Welcome back to Budget and Bling, the series where we take the Precon decks and upgrade them for a little or a lot. Today we're going to look at Legends Legacy starring Dihada, Binder of Wills. We're going to go over some budget upgrades, some very blingin' upgrades, and at the end I'm going to tell you what I would cut from this Precon to make it immediately more competitive, and the video starts right now.
Highest level of gratitude to our patrons who power the channel through Patreon. Check out the Patreon link in the description to learn about monthly giveaways, VIP Discord access, and even our official playmat.
Hello and welcome to the day. Thank you for spending your time with us. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. I am Joel. We're getting into Legends Legacy. We got budget upgrades, we got bling upgrades, and we got some cuts at the end. If you think the video gives you any value by the end of it, help us out and hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Let's take a look at this commander. Dihada, Binder of Wills, a black, a white, a red, and one other for a 5 loyalty Planeswalker. Dihada's got a +2 to give up to one target legendary creature, Vigilance, Lifelink, and Indestructible until your next turn. So you'll be able to attack with that creature, it will stay up to block, and it will be indestructible the entire time. Plus, it's got Lifelink, so it's going to give you some life back if it's dealing combat damage. The -3 says reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put in any number of legendary cards from among them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Create a treasure token for each card put into your graveyard this way. So we've got a definite legendary synergy showing itself right on the card of the commander, and we've also got a little graveyard play there. Dihada also has a ultimate ability for -11 to gain control of all non-land permanents until end of turn, untap them, and they gain haste until end of turn. So an absolutely bonkers ultimate that, if you can get to it, will be awesome, but it's probably not very often that we're going to be getting there. We will use the +2 to make a vigilant, lifelinking, indestructible attacker and blocker pretty much every turn, but using that second ability for card advantage and mana ramp via treasure tokens that's very likely we're going to be using that a lot as well. So getting up to 11 is probably not on the menu here. As a side note, this deck has fantastic card draw and removal already built into it. What I want to do with my upgrades here and some of the cuts that I'm going to make, I want to improve the quality of some of the legendary creatures and increase the quantity of legendary creatures that are in the deck. I don't think that it out of the box comes with a nice number of legendary creatures that are going to help you get there over the course of a long game. There's also that graveyard strategy that we want to support a little bit, so look out for cards in the budget and the bling upgrades that sort of play into that. Starting with the budget upgrades, for $1, we can pick up Thalia's Lancers. It itself is not a legendary creature, and so you don't want to run too many non-legendary creatures in here because you want to be able to target them with that top ability on Dihada. But when Thalia's Lancers enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a legendary card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So this is tutor specifically for a legendary creature, so you can go and get the exact one that you need in any situation. Plus, you get a 4/4 first striker on the battlefield to boot. Not a bad deal, especially for $1. Along the same lines of tutor, the Search for Glory Snow Sorcery from Kaldheim, only $1, 1 white and 2 other to search your library for a snow permanent card, don't care. A legendary card, that's the piece we want, or a saga card, reveal it and put it into your hand. The rest we don't really care. We're not going snow mana with this. This is just a cheap way to tutor up legendary cards right into your hand. So just like with Thalia's Lancer, you can search up a legendary land, a legendary enchantment. It doesn't have to be a legendary creature that you go and get with Search for Glory. Now, let's get into some legendary creatures that I want to put in the deck and start with Chain or Nightmare Adept. This is playing into sort of that graveyard strategy, Dihada's second ability, that kind of thing. Discard a card and you can cast a creature spell from your graveyard this turn. Activate only once each turn. This is pretty huge. We can turn lands that we don't need. We can turn any card that we don't need into a cast creature from our graveyard. Then whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if you didn't cast it from your hand, it gains haste until your next turn. So anything that we do recast from our graveyard, say it gets killed or it gets discarded, however it gets in there, Chainer's able to bring them back for only the cost of a card and their mana cost, and it gets haste so that it can go ahead and start doing its thing immediately. Only $1 for Chainer. Now, Gisa, this is a $2 card, but I really love Glorious Resurrector here. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. That's already huge, because a lot of creatures in Commander especially have death triggers. Now, if they don't die, if they get exiled instead, they don't get their death triggers, and that can be really backbreaking to some decks. Also, a lot of decks want to use their graveyard as their second hand, so if we're exiling the creatures instead of letting them die, that's just such a powerful single line of text on this legendary creature. It also says at the beginning of your upkeep, put all creature cards exiled with Gisa Glorious Resurrector onto the battlefield under your control, and they gain Decayed, meaning they will just sit there, but they cannot block. And if they attack, you do have to sacrifice it at the end of the combat step. So you only get one attack with these, and they can't block, but you could get their static abilities, their passive abilities. You could have those on your side, or you can get that one big attack in, use them as a sacrifice for some other card, get that synergy going. I really like this legendary in this deck, and for only $2, very affordable to replace some of the less impactful legends that the deck comes with out of the box. Then the last one in the budget category for $7, we're going to look at Adeline Resplendent Cathar. 3 mana for a star 4 Vigilant Human Knight. Its power is equal to the number of creatures you control. So another something that this deck has out of the box is sort of a token strategy, creating token creatures onto the battlefield. Adeline, if you want to lean into that kind of thing, is very powerful for you. Whenever you attack for each opponent, you create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker they control. So we go wider, Adeline's power gets bigger, and with Dihada's ability to make it vigilant, lifelink, indestructible, this card could absolutely be a smacker in your deck, especially if you want to lean more into the token creature strategy and less into the graveyard strategies. As for the Bling upgrades, I want to start with the $10 Aurelia the War Leader. This card has been more expensive, but it did get a reprint in Double Masters 22, which helped it a lot. It is a 6 mana 3/4. It's got flying, vigilance, and haste, so you can use it the turn it comes into play. But when Aurelia attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So essentially, you get to attack twice when Aurelia attacks. This can be huge, especially with your creatures having indestructible, because hopefully you've built a lot of legendary creatures into this deck. Dihada's given them indestructible, lifelink, vigilance. They're attacking through like crazy. Aurelia's leading the charge for $10. This is a big, splashy attacking creature that you probably want to think about very heavily. Now, I tried to find some good options for non-creature legends because there are some synergies in the deck that specifically just go and search up a legendary card. You know, Thalia's Lancer, Search for Glory, these kind of cards that we want to put in there. You could go search up Core Haven. You add a colorless mana to your mana pool as just a tap ability on this legendary land. But for a white and one other, you tap it to prevent all combat damage that would be dealt by target attacking creature this turn. It nullifies one of your opponent's attacks. Now, you know, say that you're playing against some kind of Voltron deck where they're suiting up one big creature. Just use your tutor, go get Core Haven, and now that card is effectively shut down. And we can search it up because it's a legendary land. $15 for Core Haven, but I think it will play really well in here. Now, Phyrexian Bay Elesh Norn belongs in this deck for sure, especially if you're leaning into the token strategy, because your tokens will get that +2/+2 passively, and Elesh Norn gives all of your opponent's creatures -2/-2 on top of having vigilance. This is another real big, splashy, top-endy legend, but I love these Praetors. I have to include Elesh Norn. If we're in a Mardu deck that sort of has a token sub-theme, Elesh Norn absolutely belongs in here. $20 for Elish, but I really think that every single time you play it, you will be very excited by this Praetor being on your side of the battlefield. Now, let's talk about a Super Bling card. This isn't the most expensive card I'm going to suggest, but it is $80, and that's because it's pretty much only been printed in Portal 3 Kingdoms and a couple of other times. Loyal Retainers is 1 white, 2 other for a 1/1. You sacrifice Loyal Retainers to return target legendary card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is huge. You can only do this on your turn. You can't do it at instant speed, but yo, getting a legendary creature from your graveyard into the battlefield. We just looked at Elish Norn. If we can get Elish into the graveyard, Loyal Retainers on the battlefield, sack Loyal Retainers, Elish Norn's onto the battlefield for free. That's huge. If they answer it, we play Loyal Retainers after that, get it back. You know, this is what I'm talking about. This is the few non-legendary creatures that I would recommend running in this deck. This is an $80 card. It's tough for me in good conscience to recommend that you go buy a Portal 3 Kingdoms card because these aren't on the reserve list, and honestly it's just one reprint going to make this tank. We've seen it a few times over the last couple years. So proxy up a copy of Loyal Retainers. Just know that currently it's a pretty expensive card, but that's only due to scarcity. Yes, this is a really strong effect, but this isn't probably an $80 effect. You know what I'm saying? I do like Loyal Retainers in this deck though. As the most expensive card in this deck, it's a legendary land. How boring, Joel, but I think this card is not boring. Volrath's Stronghold, legendary land, that's second ability. 1 black and 1 other to tap it and put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. So you can do that at instant speed on the end of your opponent's turn, get that creature back that they answered, put it right back on top of your library, draw it on your next turn, and get back to cranking out your victory. As for the cuts in this deck, I would cut Alesha, who smiles at death, returning a creature card with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped and attacking. Little low stakes for us, and we want to go with more impactful, bigger legendary creatures. If you do want to play this more low to the ground, definitely make sure that this card stays in. But, you know, also just make sure that if you're going to run cards like this, you want to be able to have hits throughout the course of a game. And I think that there's just too few hits for Alesha to be in the deck. Same with Anafen's a Kentree Spirit. I think this is just pretty low stakes. Whenever a creature non-token enters the battlefield under your control, you bolster 1, which means you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature with the least toughness on your battlefield. It only happens when the creature ETBs. It's only 1 counter. It can grow kind of out of control fast, but this isn't a card that I want to leave in here unless we're going to really kind of focus on the +1/+1 strategy. And so if you want to have +1/+1, you know, counters on your planeswalkers, lean into that kind of strategy, this is a card that you might want to keep. I would say cut Bell Borka. At the beginning of your upkeep, you're exiling the top card of your library and you can play it this turn, and that's good. It's just kind of slow. His power does become the greatest number noted for a card that's been put into exile, but it's not consistent enough. Sometimes, you know, if you hit a land, this is a 0/5, you can play that land this turn, I guess, and the card advantage is good, but you're in black. I mean, as one of your colors in this deck, you shouldn't be wanting for card draw that badly. Just put a good card draw spell in here. I know it's on a legendary creature, but this just is one that I'm not really interested in. Kari Zev, since we are cutting cards like Alesha, I don't want to run such a small creature. It does have First Strike and Menace, and we can give it some other abilities with Dihada, but we can't grow that power. It creates a token, so it's kind of in that strategy too. It's really low stakes for me. I want stuff that's more impactful in my commander deck. Bantu's Monument, whenever you cast a creature spell, each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. This is good. It's a legendary artifact, which is why I think it was included in here, but we don't really have any aristocrats type strategy going, which is that each opponent losing a life, you gain a life, stacking as many of those onto the battlefield as possible. The black creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. That's kind of cool. I just don't really love this card in this deck. The same sort of thing with Hazoret's Monument. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you discard. If you do, draw. It's fine, but I think that we would rather have some more legendary creatures in the deck than legendary artifacts. I think these were just included as kind of a cute inclusion that we can have some legends that aren't necessarily creatures. You tap an untap legendary permanent to untap Honor-Worn Shaku, and it taps for colorless. It's slow. It's just a colorless. If it was maybe adding mana of any color, that would maybe help us out a little bit with our fixing. Otherwise, I really don't want this in the deck. It's just not this type of synergy that we want. Target legendary creature getting +2/+2 until end of turn for Sword of the Chosen. Again, it's low stakes. It's just not enough. If it was getting like +5/+5 and maybe trample or some ability like that and cost more as a result of it being better, I would maybe run it then, but it's just low stakes for me in this build, and so I'd rather cut it out for some more impactful things. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 just off the rip with Tenza Godo's Maul. As long as it's legendary, it gets an additional +2/+2, so it's giving a legendary creature +3/+3, and then if it's a red one, it gives trample. If you end up running more red legendaries in this deck than the other two colors, this is absolutely a card that you want to keep. I just don't like the critical mass of, you know, white and black and red creatures in here. Sometimes they're going to miss that trample and +3/+3. Again, who cares? Not that worried about it. I don't want to grow the powers just by 3. I want them to be super impactful. Trample's really good to put on a creature, but again, has to be red. So I would probably end up cutting Tenza, as would I cut Day of Destiny. Same thing. It's the same thing I've said multiple times about multiple the cards that I would cut. This just is kind of low stakes. +2/+2. All of the board +2/+2. Fine. Maybe that's kind of cool, but I think with this one, we're going to end up having, you know, 2, maybe 3 creatures out at once. It's not going to be this like super go wide strategy where, you know, this potentially adds 20 power to the board if we've got 10 creature tokens. But, you know, if you do lean more into the creature tokens and you're able to make legendary creature tokens, a lot of them, maybe you want to keep Day of Destiny, but for our build, I just don't want this card in there. That's what I think of Legends Legacy. If you got this deck and you're working on it right now, you want to ask some questions, get down there in the comments. Let us know what you're wondering. Let us know if you've got any good suggestions for upgrades or cuts. I'd love to chat about it with you, and our community would love to chat about it with you as well. Speaking of our community, if you want to get involved with our channel on a deeper level, go join our Patreon. The lowest level has so many benefits, and it just goes up from there. You really should go check it out and see if you're a good fit. Get involved with our community on a deeper level. And if you just got some value out of the video and you want to move along with your day, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and consider hitting share and sending it to somebody that you think might want to build Legends Legacy into a little bit bigger deck, whether they've got a budget or a bling kind of attitude that they're going at it with. Other than that, I'm tapped out, and I'll catch you later.